Hi, we're here at Core Studios in West London. I'm here with owner-manager George. Now, George, Core is an unusual thing because it's a studio that's thriving in this kind of difficult time. Why is that?
Well, I think we've been very lucky. We kind of positioned ourselves in the right place in the market, and that the size of the spaces is relevant to people wanting to get nice acoustic recordings, and the equipment is very kind of high spec. And of course, the price is kind of at that right point that it makes it
competitive and whatever. Yeah, I'm
realistic.
Sure. So this is the main live room. Lovely space actually. So I guess you can do whole band recordings in here.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's great for that because you've got the two booths, which are really well separated, so you can have amps kind of raging away in there, and they don't get in here. And there's actually tie lines all over the building, so we've had people kind of all over the place. But for a 4 or 5 piece band, everyone gets in here very comfortably.
So, I mean, the key thing about it is, if we maybe go towards the control room, the key thing about it is you've kind of gone for a specific sound, which is the sound of the API console, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which we'll take a look at now. So this is the desk. It's kind of expanded, right? It's got split into 2 halves.
Yep.
So take me through just the layout before we have a listen.
Well, you start off with your bass module, which is the 16-channel version, which has the sort of monitor section and some extra echo return business. And then you can expand it by getting a 16-channel and an additional 16 channels that bolts on. So there's lots of different ways of using it. The most common sort of setup for us is, because we've got our EQs and stuff over here, these faders will be after the mic amps and EQ, sending off to Pro Tools, and then we listen back and do the headphones and everything on this side, which kind of suits the workflow because everything that's coming back there is kind of clean, and it's quick to recall it, and usually the faders are up at 0.
So these are the additional 500 modules that you can put in across this sort of top bay, so you could fill this out.
We just kind of started off with this kind of bass setup, and then over time we'll add more and more. Yeah, it's great because obviously the API EQ is really powerful and great for tracking.
So you've got a drum session here on Pro Tools. Come back on this side of the desk. So can we take a listen?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing with the API mic amps is they really do get the kind of transient detail, so it's just amazing for drums. So as you can hear, and then so it's got that real kind of aggressive front sound to it, which is great because we do a lot of rock drum stuff here. And then if you get the old 2500 in the mix as well, you can.
Oh, that's like a two bass compressor.
2 bass compressor, yeah. There's all sorts of sort of crazy possibilities there.
All right, that's starting to sound more like a record. Well, a drum solo, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
On a record. You can hear this. I mean, these consoles. I mean, the thing about the API sound. I mean, as we know, it's that sort of classic. It's the sound of classic recordings from the 60s and 70s, which, many of us, it's a reference point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, people talk about the summing thing, but really with these consoles, I mean, it is there straight away. Just it sounds like music, straight away. You start putting things up the faders, and just the way it kind of glues it all together so quickly, just it just sounds like a record, kind of right from the get-go. And you're almost kind of thinking, am I doing enough? Because it kind of just does itself, which was, one of the really kind of striking things that I noticed straight away. It's like you get a sound up on the mic amp, and, whereas before you'd be reaching for an EQ straight away, with this, you're like, does that need an EQ? It just
sounds good,
it's
right.
there. So, yeah, I mean, it does, it makes you look good, which, I need.
Key.
Yeah, really.
And this is the classic 550B. And I noticed you've got a Moog Mother 32 over here, which I'm going to have to see if we can...
Yeah, dig in, try it out.
So if I push the fader up here, this is quite a thin sound. So this EQ here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I switch that in, that's really starting to... These are quite extreme settings, but it still sounds quite musical, isn't it? We can take
Absolutely,
it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a multi-band filter in its own kind of strange way as well.
Yeah.
And that's within. Wow. So we've got the mic amps at the bottom on these channels, then, and there's just the aux sends and the pan at the top. It's an unusual channel layout.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, it is actually very kind of intuitive because, you know, it's nice to have the mic amp right there in front of you instead of kind of reaching up to the top. And, you know, having the fader after the mic amp is nice. You've got a direct out on every channel, so you can sort of get, you know, a crunchier gain, say, on the mic amp and then pull it back so it doesn't overload Pro Tools. Lots of flexibility with the auxes. 8 buses is fantastic. It's kind of, we never really find that we need much more than that. I've got this Avid Artist mix in the middle just because on a recent session I was literally using every mic amp on the desk on a fader, which is amazing because you're right in the middle between the speakers, and instead of turning around to the racks to grab things, it's all just there. And then I use the 8 echo returns to feed Pro Tools back into the desk, and my physical faders were this.
Okay, so you're using more of a summing sort of situation.
So yeah, but lots of different ways of doing it, you know, really flexible.
So I imagine if you're in the US, you probably know quite a lot more about API than you are if you're in the UK. We've got Andy here, who's going to tell us a bit more about the history and some of the other products available. So Andy, I know a little bit about the API brand. I mean, primarily these kind of started out in American studios, right?
That's right. I mean, if you think of API as the quintessential American analog brand. In the UK, obviously, we're very fortunate to have the likes of Neve and SSL. But in the States, right through the kind of late 60s into the 70s to the present day, API is really entrenched in that kind of American rock radio sound. A lot of really big classic albums were recorded through APIs, likes of Hotel California by the Eagles, a lot of the Stevie Wonder stuff, Michael Jackson, Steely Dan, a lot of the Toto stuff. So kind of really almost like reference records, really seminal.
Yeah, how many times have you heard Steely Dan on a PA as the engineer setting up?
Exactly, yeah. It's like that thing of what does Steely Dan sound engineer used to check his PA with, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of these records that have stuck with us for stood the test of time and sound timeless.
And I guess the circuitry runs consistent through, because I mean, obviously they started with modules like these guys. This is where they actually started out rather than like complete consoles, and that circuitry is kind of consistent.
It is. I suppose the secret of API comes down to the 2520 op amp, which was the initial design of a chap called Sol Walker, which in kind of when the company started in around about 1967, 68, was a discrete op amp encased in epoxy, which is kind of the heart of every single module. So from the 560 EQs, from where it all started, right through to the mic amps, the compressors, and those op amps are scattered all the way through the consoles. And it's exactly the same whether it's an individual module or the console.
Right,
same
so it gives you
circuit.
that sound. So what's in these? These are mic pre's.
So you've got the 512 mic pre, which the API mic pre comes in various different guises. So on the 1608 console, for example, it's the same pre as you find in the 500 series, as you would find in the 3124 rack mount unit.
So this is like a 4-channel mic
Yeah,
pre, right?
essentially the only thing that changes would be the input impedance on the high Z and the traces of the circuit. So kind of to fit that form factor.
So these are kind of presumably alternatives to kind of starting to get into the API world,
Absolutely. Right? I mean, if you're kind of moving from room to room, or you're kind of starting to build up a system, then starting with the 500 series modules, you're not kind of you're not limited sonically. It's not like you're buying the light version of it. You still get that character that's inherent with all the API products, and you can just scale it up and, like you said, with the 500 series, create channel strips. So start off with a mic pre, then add an EQ, then maybe a compressor towards the back end of that, so you can set up your own kind of bespoke custom channel strip if you like. Since the introduction of the box, which was API's smallest console, kind of effect a summing console with the ability to track and a full master section. We've kind of found this going into smaller studios where you might have an artist that's only working with a few sources on input, maybe it's a vocal and maybe some programming, and then the rest is being stemmed back from a DAW. We found that a lot of the dance guys have really grabbed hold of it and gravitated towards it because of the transient response, because of that forward mid-range that the API gives. Because again, they stumbled across this thing that huge headroom on that mix bus, and it doesn't fold in the same way that other consoles do. You can really punish it and it still sounds dynamic, forward.
So, I mean, I'm guessing all of this also, it's like hand built by...
Exactly. So, I mean, everything, the only thing that they make in China is the brochure for the box. Everything else is built at the Maryland factory. Everything is hand assembled, has a 3-point QC check when it leaves, and with the consoles when they come to the UK, we check them over, and with the larger stuff we unload the console, deliver it to the client, and fully commission it on site. So it's done with a lot of love, and the thing with API is anybody who's experienced it, anybody who's worked in a studio that has an API console or API outboard, generally leaves
thinking, I wouldn't mind one of those.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. They kind of feel like they're a part of the family, and they do tend to get the bug for it. I mean, I think that's the thing with a lot of equipment like this. I think George referred to it earlier, that it does make your life a lot easier. You put a source through it, and then suddenly it's right. Originally, if you're kind of running it through a more of a sterile piece of equipment, you maybe reach for an EQ to try and inject some character. Whereas with kind of these kind of circuits, there's a vibe there instantly. There's something that's happened, something that's exciting, and you do that on a console basis, and suddenly it's cumulative. So you just get more of everything. So everything's more forward, everything's punchier, and everything becomes more of an event, if you like.
Right. Catching the vibe, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of something that is kind of is difficult to achieve sometimes. But when you find it, it's a special thing. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy,
Not a
for telling us
problem.
a bit about API. That's it. Thanks for watching.